I'm here with Geoffrey Hilder, and we're going to talk a bit about street evangelism. Geoffrey, you've been in the UK for a number of years doing this sort of thing. How many years have you been coming to the UK?
Do you know, Matt, I've lost count.
Okay.
I think it's been at least between 10 and 12 years, I think. So it's
Okay.
been quite a while.
Okay. You visit from Sydney.
Yes.
You do a similar thing over there occasionally.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
The reason I wanted to particularly interview you is because this stuff that you're thinking about in walk-up evangelism or street evangelism, I think has a huge amount to help us with, just generally in the area of conversations. You're having a lot of conversations on the street?
Yes, well, when I'm over here, I visit sometimes a dozen or more churches, and we form teams in those churches, and we go out onto the street and have maybe half a dozen conversations in an hour. It always depends. You can never say exactly how many conversations we're going to have in that hour that we're on the street. Sometimes you can have a nice one for half an hour that's pure quality. Another time it may be 3 or 4. So but usually we do 4 or 5 within an hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so some of what we're going to talk about now might be specific to street evangelism, but I hope that some of what we'll pull out of you now, and you've got your notes
I
here
have.
to help us.
Thank you for allowing me.
You can have the notes. Some of what we might pull out of you, I hope is going to be helpful for us as generally we think about how do we have conversations with unbelievers? What might that look like? What are some things we can think about? So if it's okay, we'll just take it pretty much start, middle to end of one of these conversations. So can you talk us through, as we start off, as you're approaching someone on the street to start with, what are you thinking about? How are you making that approach?
Well, before we start off, Matt, the first thing we do is we get together in twos. So we always go out in groups of 2, and I always get the people to talk with each other as soon as I pair them up, so that we find out who out of those 2 people is the best at communicating. There's always one that will communicate better than the other, and that person will be what I call number 1. They're the one that goes up and introduces themselves and starts the conversation. Now, number 2, or the secondary person, is not really secondary at all. They're very important. In fact, their job there is to stay attentive during the conversation. And as the conversation is progressing there, they would be ready to back up number 1 there in case he got into any kind of difficulty while he was talking. But probably the most important job for number 2 is to be praying with his inner voice. Now, we all have an inner voice, don't we? Can you say hello to me with your inner voice?
I've just done that.
Thank you. Yeah. That's it, the inner voice. So that's very powerful. So we've got a nice, powerful combination going on there.
Great.
So then we set off in the street, and I always encourage people to approach one person, a single person in the street there. And because if you approach 2 people, they will never talk to you from their heart like they do as in a one-to-one conversation. So it's always good if it's one person, and of course if they're joined by their partner during the conversation, obviously you have to try and bring that person into the conversation. And then of course we only approach people that are standing or sitting.
Okay, why is that?
Stationary. Well, the hardest thing in the world is to stop somebody that's walking along in the street. You might often see the people on a Saturday morning with corporate T-shirts on and waving a little thing and waving you over there, and most people run from that situation. So my concern is that we walk up to someone and basically take them by surprise. So if we have tracts, for example, we keep them in our back pocket.
Okay.
So we go straight up to the people and introduce ourselves.
Okay, so how do you do that?
Well, the first thing is, the very first thing to remember for those people that may be taking notes today, is the first thing we do when we approach somebody is to introduce ourselves, but the first couple of minutes involve gaining rapport with that person.
Okay.
Now, if you gain rapport with somebody, you can talk about anything. If you haven't gained rapport with that person before you start dropping the seeds of the gospel around them, they're liable to reject you straight away and walk away. So number 1, very important, gain rapport. And of course we do that by asking questions. Getting an answer, asking a question. getting an answer. And so after a few minutes, you look at the person and you'll see, well, that person, by the look in their eye, their body language, whether they're getting to like you as a person.
Okay.
And when you see that you've gained the rapport there, then you can drop the seeds of the gospel, so to speak, and they won't feel a thing.
So what's your opening line then? When you say, I'm Geoffrey, imagine you're from, we're at Christchurch Bromley here, so introduce us to this person.
Yes, I will. Just a little pointer at first, though. So only people stationary in the street. And secondly, it's very important, if I could encourage people, not to take a no for an answer. And the reason for this, and I know that's very difficult for some people, but it's very easy to do with a little bit of practice. The reason for this is if you approach 10 people for a conversation, you would have 2 conversations out of 10 instead of 8. So it's a huge difference. So important not to take the first no for an answer. So you just rephrase your question and come back at that person. If you get a reject like, oh no, thank you. Look, we're not preaching here today. We've got the day off, and but what we are doing is we're talking about belief, and so we rephrase it and come back in again. So starting off, I'll go up and let's say I'm with you. I'll say, hello, my name's Geoffrey, and this is Matt, and we're from. Where are we now?
Christchurch.
We are at Christchurch Bromley, for those people that don't know. We're from Christchurch Bromley, and what we're doing today is talking about belief. Now, some people believe in a faith. Some people believe there are men that actually live on the moon and eat green cheese. Some people believe in reincarnation, Buddhism. Some people have a philosophy. Do you have a faith? So I've mentioned faith in the beginning and faith at the end. And the reason being, if I was to just walk up to somebody and say, we're talking about belief today, do you have a belief? The person's not able to think that quickly, so he's going to think, well, I believe in, so he's a bit lost. But if you mention faith in the beginning, faith at the end, their mind clicks and they realise they're suddenly talking about a very deep subject, which will be their belief.
Can I just pause you on that? Because I think that's really helpful for, obviously that's what you're doing on the streets, but what you've mentioned there is you're saying, if we have a rapport with someone, if we've developed that rapport, I think you said you can really talk about anything. Is that your experience?
That's definitely it. And that's quite normal, I think, in any situation with anybody in the street, isn't it? You can once you've gained a rapport, if somebody is in a town somewhere and they're all alone, they say, well, I'll go to the pub and have a drink and try and meet someone to talk to, and you stand at the bar there. Well, the first thing you do, look at the person next to you and say, hello, my name's Geoffrey, do you live around here? Do you work around here? What do you do for a living? So you ask questions, you get an answer, and before long that person will start talking about himself, and then a rapport will happen between you both. And when you see that rapport, and you'll always see it in somebody's eyes, then you know it's time to drop the message. And of course, you haven't got to say you're a Christian or anything. He'll expect you to say something like the word sin, for example, because he knows you're a Christian right from the start. You've gained the rapport, and in that person's mind, he's thinking to himself, oh, this guy's okay, actually, he's not too bad. But I always keep it light, keep the conversation light.
And what are ways that you do that just keep it light? What are you looking for?
Sometimes I tell a little joke, or I just keep it light. Nothing.
Eye contact, smile.
Everything, yeah. And that's very important too when you go out onto the street. Just be aware. Are you smiling when you go up to that person? You know, some people aren't aware of it, or they may be a little apprehensive. Now, Matt, a lot of people are apprehensive about doing this kind of work. In other words, they feel a bit nervous about approaching a stranger. They feel a bit frightened. Sometimes they're shaking a little bit. And I've found the three things that where that concern lies is the first one is when you approach a stranger there, you're walking up to that person, you're eyeing them off right in the eye there, and as soon as you're walking up to them, that person starts to look at you approaching, you're looking at them, that person's starting to think, well, I wonder what this person wants. Why is he coming over to me? I don't even know him. And I'm thinking, I wonder how that person's going to react. I wonder if that person will react okay. So the sooner you actually introduce yourself, the sooner you get up and say, hello, my name's Geoffrey, this is Matt, we're from Christchurch, Bromley, the person relaxes. As they relax, you relax.
And you're just saying to them, we're from Christchurch, Bromley, and what we've come to do is to ask people about what they
Well, actually,
believe.
what I say is, what we're doing today is, my name's Geoffrey, this is Matt, we're from Christchurch, Bromley, and what we're doing today is, we're talking about belief.
Okay. And you mentioned it, but I want to pick you up on it. This thing about options. So you say we want to talk about belief, and then you say, some people believe there's a God. Some people believe there's Buddhism. And then this one about the man on the moon. Why do you add that one in, the sort of light one?
Again, to keep it light, to keep the conversation light. You don't want it too serious. Some people think there's men on the moon, or there's people that dance in the street. Whatever it may be.
So you're giving them options so that they can hang something on that, and that you find people warm up to that and a bit more interested.
They warm up to that, and also they know. You've said faith in the beginning and faith at the end, so they know their answer should be something that's deep or about their belief. And a lot of people will come up and they'll say something about a religious belief. Either I don't believe, or I'm a Christian, or whatever it may be. So
one more thing, and then you can just pick up from where you were on the notes. So what surprised me when I first heard you do this, and I think others when they've heard you, is that you're asking questions. You're asking them what their belief is. So you're not first going onto the street to say, I've come to share the gospel. And that might be helpful for us generally in our conversations, not just on the street, but with others, where in effect a first approach is to say, can I ask you what your beliefs are?
Another thing,
is that what you're doing?
Yes, and another thing I do as well, I may not open with that line always. I may walk up to someone, introduce myself and say, what we're doing is we're just going around saying hello to people in the streets. As simple as that. When was the last time someone came up to you and said, hello, how are you in the street? Are you enjoying this beautiful day we're having? And they'll usually come back and say, never. Never. It's the first time. And that's what you want. And so then you can come on to the belief thing, a minute
because
or two
you've got
later.
some sort of rapport. So we're approaching people, we're asking questions, we're looking for people who are stationary, and we're trying to not take no for an answer, which for some Brits might feel a bit awkward, but we're trying to get over that. So assuming then that people are warming up, what happens then? So you've said that first bit, and people respond. Where do you go then?
Well, I keep the rapport going. So what I'll do is I will ask. So my first question may be, for example, how are you today, and then get into general conversation rapport. Then I may get on to belief if I didn't open with belief in the first part. So whatever that person replies back to me. So once I start the belief thing, whatever his replies to me, I will ask another question, about what he has replied to me. Then we'll go back and forth like that. As he comes back with a question, I stay on that line that he's...
do you want to try that?
We can try it,
So you've asked you said about
do you have a belief at all?
I used to sort of go to church when I was young. I kind of believe there's a God. I think, I believe there's a God.
Well, you said you went to church when you were young. Did you go very often when you were young?
My granny always, she took me when I was young, but then I stopped.
By the ear like that?
Yeah, a little bit by the ear. I wasn't always that keen, but we went when I was young.
Well, so did you heard the story of Jesus?
Yeah, I remember hearing the story of Jesus, and
you know it pretty well then.
We did it at primary school, sort of vague, a bit.
And now you don't go to church at all.
No,
it's
not really,
it's probably a peer thing, isn't it? As you get older, you get this peer pressure. Your friends are doing other things, and if you were to say, "Hey guys, I can't make it today. I'm off to church this morning," suddenly you've got no friends. So it happens. I hear the story over and over again. So can you tell me why? Do you think the that Jesus came to earth? What was his main reason for coming to earth?
To love us or something like that?
To love us, yeah, that's yes,
Okay.
yes. You'll notice I'm saying yes a lot too. Yes is a very positive word.
Okay.
So even though I'm saying yes, yes, yes to all of your conversation, it doesn't mean I agree with your content.
Okay, yeah.
No? Yes, yes, he's got it. He's got the yes, yes. So what it is yes is a very positive word. No is a negative word. So when you're talking to someone, especially initially, yes, 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 yes. And that keeps it positive, and it keeps him talking. So we're gaining the rapport. I've lost the whole
No, that's
point
fine.
now.
That's fine. So that's helpful. So we've got a certain way there. You've asked me some questions. You kept me talking. You've discovered a bit about Granny, my peers. I don't go to church. I understand a bit of the. And I know about Jesus. Maybe.
Yes.
I guess it's very different if someone hasn't. You'll go in a different direction. They don't know about Jesus. But at some point. Do you just keep asking questions forever?
Yeah, no, until I can see that I've gained rapport with you. So you're coming, I'm asking you, you're smiling, you're talking to me, and I can see, this guy's okay, he's comfortable with me, we're talking, it's good. And then I think, okay, so maybe 3 minutes into the conversation, 4 minutes, I think, okay, it's time to drop the seeds of the gospel.
Okay, but 3 or 4 minutes, so that's maybe more than I would have done, but you're asking, you're just trying to
maybe it could be less. I've never actually tried, but maybe only 2 minutes.
Okay, fine.
And some people will say, well, how can I gain rapport with a stranger in 2 minutes?
Right.
But a few questions back or forwards, and you'll catch on to what once that person starts talking about something about himself, and you carry on with that same conversation, he'll be thinking to himself, oh, this is good. This guy, he really likes listening to me. I think I'll just let myself loose and talk now. And so then you've got to stop them and sort of come into that.
So you're taking an interest in this person.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
That's it.
He has to see that as well.
So you're not just thinking, gosh, I've got to direct this in this direction. You're genuinely trying to draw him out, gain a rapport, take an interest.
Yes,
but at some point, you mentioned this phrase, dropping in the seeds of the gospel.
Yeah.
Take us to that.
So dropping in the seeds of the gospel, as they're very quick conversations, so our conversations are probably, some can be 3, 4, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes. They're overall quick conversations. So, of course, we're about sin and redemption. What can we drop in? What are the subjects we can drop in fairly quickly? And I always refer back to one of the little tracts that I take out quite a lot is 2 Ways to Live. And in there we've got 6 pointers. We have creation, sin, judgment, Jesus, the resurrection, and your way or God's way. The difference between my righteousness and God's righteousness. However, we don't have time to go through all of those pointers in just a few minutes. So I'll stick to, out of those 6 pointers, I'll stick to sin, justice, Jesus. Okay. Sin, justice, Jesus. So the next hardest hurdle is to get over the word sin. Because a lot of people, they don't like the word sin, they don't like to hear it at all. The same as they don't like to hear the word hell. I'll often use separation from God or separation from your creator. But I stay away from words that people don't want to hear and still drop the seeds in there. So that's the trick of it. So what I'll do, I've gained rapport with the person. So my next step is to say, right, I'm going to start dropping seeds here. So getting over this word sin is very important to do it at the right time. If you bring it in too early, the person is liable to say, well, look, I've been getting on with you real well, and I thought you were good, but you're starting to preach now. You brought up this word. You're starting to preach and end of the conversation, and that can happen if you bring it in too early. However, if everything's going good, I'll just say, I'll probably know the guy's name. I'll say, look, Bob, the word sin. You know, I never hear it these days. I don't know about you. Well, I hear it these days. Obviously, in my circles, in my Christian circles, I hear it at church. I read it in the Bible. But when I'm outside my Christian circles, I never hear the word sin. In fact, I think it's going out of the English vocabulary. And words do actually go out of the English vocabulary, don't they? But when was the last time you were in a pub or something and you overheard the word someone talking about sin? Or you just don't hear it these days. What does sin mean to you?
And Bob will have a go and he'll say, well, being a bit naughty.
And from that answer, you'll know where to come back, because we have to know that Bob understands what sin is before we can go any further in the gospel. So we have to know he's got a reasonably good understanding. So I'll always use a very simple little approach, like so let's say I get the idea that he doesn't know, he needs a little bit of coaching here. I'll say, well, look, Bob, imagine you're at work there and you need a rubber band to take home, and there's thousands of rubber bands, but you take a little rubber band, discreetly put it in your back pocket there, and you go away, you go home, and it's not even going to bother your conscience. You'll probably even forget you've got it in your back pocket. That's how much it means to you. But in God's eyes, that's stealing. So what I'm showing here is that even the smallest little thing is significant to God. Or you leave work early, you've left work 5 minutes early, and you're walking out backwards, making sure he owes you overtime, he owes you so much, your boss, but however you feel a bit guilty about it, you're walking out backwards 5 minutes early. Well, stealing time. In God's eyes, that's stealing time. So the guy will turn around and he'll say something like, well, you know, if you look at it like that, I guess everybody is guilty of being sinful. You've hit it right on the head, Bob. That's it. We are all guilty. We were born like that, weren't we? It's just, we can't even help it. We were born crooked.
So you'll start with sin, and
then we go on to justice. So he's got the idea of sin, and then we go on to justice. So I might say something like, well, do you know, Bob, then God said that if you sin just one time in your life, when you die, you will go, well, I'm not saying where you're going, but you'll be separated from your Creator, separated from God. And that's not a very nice thing to look forward to. However, the good news is, and this is the good news, Bob, you're going to like this part because there is redemption. And of course, that's Jesus Christ, our Lord and Saviour. And this is what Jesus has done for us.
And you'll explain something of the cross.
Yes, yeah. But again, simple. And then I've dropped the main, says sin, justice, Jesus. And then it's a matter of leaving the rest up to the Lord. Because no matter what we say during our conversation, you're never going to change the mind of a person in a few minutes on the street. That person has certain perceptions about life and certain ideas, and when you came up, he certainly didn't want to, probably if he knew what you're going to talk about, he wouldn't even talk with you at the moment. Which is another fear people can have. It's that sometimes... well, there's another couple of fears actually. There's sometimes some people will be a little fearful that they may not be able to answer a question. What if that person on the street asks them a question and they can't answer the question, or it may be a difficult question?
And what do you say?
I tell you always, talk about what you know about, and that's the cross, the gospel. Stick to the gospel. Whenever you're in any kind of trouble in conversation there, you're in charge of the conversation. You take charge of that conversation and simply divert it back to the gospel. So, Bob, what do you think about Jesus walking on water? Do you think such a thing is possible? It's an astounding story, isn't it? That miracle of Jesus walking on. Do you think that's what? So I've changed the subject. I'll come back in again, and if I need to, I'll change it again and come back in. But stay away from anything that you can't answer.
And I guess that might be different on the street to a conversation with a friend, where you may follow that link a bit, although you want to point to Jesus.
Absolutely.
But I guess you're dealing with a time.
It's a time factor.
It's a time thing. You don't have long. There are other people you want to move on to. You're trying to work out, is there some spiritual hunger here?
Yes.
Is this worth carrying on with or not? You've got 8 to 10 minutes. You're out for an hour or so. You want to have as many conversations. So some of that is steering that, is it?
That's That's it. So exactly, it's a completely different thing if you're with somebody at a Bible study, or you're with a friend. You've got time, you know the person a little bit. You can, but initially meeting that person, keep it simple, keep it bright, keep it happy, and there's no reason why after each conversation you're not practically hugging each other, shaking hands, and people are very happy. Even the atheist you'll meet in the street, and you can't get anything out of him. He's as hard as a rock. He knows himself that you're out there doing good, He's even able to recognise that. Another thing, when I meet an atheist, someone that's really hardened, I'll ask them to go home that night. Can I encourage you to go home tonight and just close your eyes, focus, and say a prayer. Pray to God and challenge God and tell him exactly how you're feeling. Tell him exactly, I don't believe in you, I don't believe in your son. If you're real, then reveal yourself to me. Challenge God. Reveal yourself to me. And then I'll ask that person to promise that they're going to say it. And I believe they do say it. Because I find that all conversations on the street, the people are totally honest. I could never understand why. There's something spiritual going on there, but they're all totally honest, I feel. Yeah.
So just to go back through, and then we'll just tie things together. So you're starting by asking a lot of questions and gaining a rapport. At some point there's a shift where you're dropping in the seeds of the gospel. You're still asking questions there, are you? You're not. It's not just completely a download, is it? Or it's a bit.
Well, we're on Sin Justice Jesus. I'll stay on that role there, and then see what comes from that afterwards.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let's come to the end then. How do you finish it? How do you know it's time to move on? Sometimes people are nervous. Am I going to be? If I start a conversation, how will I ever exit it? Do you know what I mean? How do you?
Well, I'll always look at the person's body language.
Right, okay.
Someone. There's so many things. You haven't got to be an expert here. You can see somebody who's looking at their watch or grabbing the phone or looking over here or not paying it. You've lost that rapport thing because you've gone from rapport into something serious, the gospel, which you know they really don't want to hear. This is another fear that comes from people. Consciously or unconsciously, you know that when you're going over to have that conversation, that person doesn't want to really hear what you want to talk about. And so when you move on to the gospel bit, he's handling it okay. A lot of times they will actually enjoy it. Think, oh, I'm glad you've refreshed me with the gospel. I haven't heard it since I was a kid or whatever. But so there's a time, and when you see that shift there, you say, okay, it's time to yourself, and I pull out my little track from the back. Got a little gift for you today, Bob. Open your hand, close your eyes, Bob. Got a lovely little gift for you today. We're still friends, you know. Bang in the hand, thank you very much. And here's a little card from the church, Bob. If you're around our way, please drop in on Sunday. We'd love to see you, whatever it may be. But yes, there's always a time to finish.
Well, we've benefited here at Christchurch from your visits, and just partly just seeing your warmth and your concern for people. Are there any sort of final messages? You can check your notes if you want to, but are there any final messages you just put out there in this area of conversations or walk-up evangelism?
I think that's it basically, and I've probably forgotten half a dozen things. It's that basic, as we've talked about, we go out in twos, we introduce ourselves, we gain rapport. Once the rapport is gained, we drop the seeds of the gospel. That's your challenge then. If you get in any sort of problem at all with the way people are talking to you, always revert back to what you know, and you know the gospel. Every Christian knows the gospel. That's where you've got to stay on that ground there. Don't go off doing apologetics, which is defense of the gospel. I've never seen that work well yet. It just goes round and round, and certainly you've lost half an hour arguing about something that never gets anywhere. You're there to drop the seeds, and the Lord is there. So you're going to leave the rest up to the Lord on his shoulders, and he'll work with that the best way he can, I'm sure.
Great. Geoffrey, thank you very much. It's been great to have you with us.
Nice to see you again, Matt.